All right, everyone. We have got really special guests on today. I've been following a lot of his content for Warhammer Renaissance. If everyone knows, I did have on Josh from the Crown of Command podcast. So I follow his work, and then sort of from following the Crown of Command, I was sort of introduced to another streamer, and he is talking about Warhammer Renaissance. So I thought I would have him on. It's Cody from the GMCody YouTube channel. I'll post your link in the description. But Cody, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate it. Always a good time to come and talk gaming, especially old school Warhammer. I'm always down to do that. So, yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and should be a good time.
Yeah. I really I wanted to sort of have this conversation, and I felt you were a good person to, because you sort of seem to come similar to myself. You've played the older editions, you've sort of seen where the rank and flank has gone. You were part of, I guess, the post Warhammer blow up, and then the old world sort of coming back. So I thought that it would be good to sort of discuss, because it is, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like we're in such an interesting place where Warhammer the Old World has been a year old. I feel like there's a lot of sort of splitting of the community. How we've got
Yeah.
some, like, I don't know if you follow Mountain Miniatures, but they have introduced their Renegade pack. So now we've all of a sudden got people trying to tweak Old World. And then we also have these other sort of community driven games coming in. It's, and like all this, and then the big bombshell of Cathay coming out. So it feels, am I wrong on that? It feels like Rank and Flank is just in such a very interesting time right now. But yeah,
It,
yeah.
de- it it definitely is. It's in a weird place right now. I'll be honest. I've always kind of lived in my own bubble, if you will, in the wargaming sphere. I do kind of, because I am a wargamer. It's like, gaming is probably, one of my. It's not just a passion; it's an obsession. So I'm always have my pulse a little bit, my fingers on the pulse a little bit about what's going on, but I don't really pay attention to the newest, greatest thing. But nowadays you can't help but to see what's going on, and I'll check it out. But yeah, it's in a really odd place. I agree with you. It's almost I almost compare it to where like the D&D community, right?
That's a good
Like
comparison. Yeah.
like, and that's kind of how I feel rank and flake games are going right now. So like, when eighth edition to me was kind of like third edition D&D, right? And that was
It's a good
that
comparison.
was already a big division
Yeah.
in the community, except for the fact that eighth edition didn't do as well as third edition D&D, but it was this seismic shift in what Warhammer Fantasy was. Like those rules were really divisive. A
Yeah.
lot of old Warhammer players dropped out of playing because of it. And then, of course, you had the end times, and then what we got Age of Sigmar that really killed it. It was
Yeah.
just a total meltdown of Warhammer Fantasy. So, and out of the ashes of the end times and Age of Sigmar, we got all these community driven games. I think Ninth Age was the first one I heard about, where it was just like these guys just literally right after that happened, just picked it up and said, nope, you know what? We're just going to keep playing eighth edition and we're going to refine it and make a new ninth edition, a community made version.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the first time I heard about that. And the same thing happened to like the D&D community, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel Rank and Flake is going. They've kind of the thing is it's already the community kind of like took it and kept it afloat all these years.
Mm-hmm.
And now I feel like some of them feel like, the old world is too little too late, and they've already done their own thing. They've been keeping this arc alive for a long time. Why do we need like a new commercial version for a game that we already made better in their eyes, right? That's kind of how I see it. Right.
And I think that's a fair, and all right. It's boy, and I'm really glad to have you on, because I'm already getting, and this is my fault. So so we're gonna have you, it's like we're immediately jumping to the conversation, and I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
But real
yeah.
quick, go ahead and just tell us a little bit about your history in wargaming. And I like to try and do that just to get you on, but I love that like we're already talking, and like I'm jumping at the bit to, but I apologize. But yeah, go ahead, just tell us a little bit about it, just to sort of give some perspective to our viewers.
Sure. Well, I love a good origin story. I love origin stories. In fact, if you go to my YouTube channel, I did a 2-part series on accident. I was talking about my origin story, and I love hearing other people's origin stories. And I could literally sit here and wax and wane nostalgically about my younger years of gaming for like an hour, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep it brief. So basically, I was like a lot of us, I was well primed to love this stuff from a really young age. I mean, my dad was a big history buff, and my room was actually his man cave originally, and then it became my room. But he was a ferocious reader and a big history buff, especially military history. And he just had like a library, and that was my room. It was just covered in books. So from a young age, I was just filled in this room with all these wondrous books for a kid. You know, it's just all kinds of stuff about, you know, the Romans and the Aztecs and the Vikings and the American Civil War and the Napoleonic Wars. And needless to say, I was just really fascinated by all this stuff, war and history and all that right from the get-go, from an infant age, right?
Oh, that's great.
On top of that, you know, and on top of that, like all of us, you know, I grew up loving, absolutely loving, and was obsessed with science fiction and fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my parents were big movie buffs, and, you know, we watched all kinds of movies. You know, I watched all those movies growing up: Conan the Barbarian and Willow and the Labyrinth and the Dark Crystal and all these old science fiction movies, This Island Earth and Forbidden Planet and Godzilla movies. And so I was already well primed to love this stuff. And of course, I was already playing with toy soldiers and stuff. I was obsessed with army men and toy soldiers and all that stuff. And then around 1995 or 1996, I can't remember the exact year. I would have been 9 or 10 years old. I didn't have a lot of friends growing, like when I was a little kid. I was very awkward, lanky, tall kid, very awkward. Just, you know, like a lot of us probably were, you know, at that age. And so I didn't have any friends in school, really. I had 2 friends, and they lived across the street. They were twin brothers. And that was it. And so when I got to this new class, new start of a school year, it was either 3rd or 4th grade. It was very beginning of the school year, and I'm sitting in class, and I see this even more awkward kid. He's like two or three desks up from me, right? And he's got this really frizzy curly hair, and he's kind of chubby or whatever. And but he's reading a magazine, and of course, you know, magazines were something special, and I'm sure you can relate. Yeah, I think we're around the same age.
Oh yeah, I got into it in 1994. So like everything you're saying, like I feel right now that like I am like could like transpose so much of what you said on. But yeah, but keep on going. No, I get you. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, keep on going.
Yeah, magazines and stuff kind of had like a magic to them back then. You know, if somebody had a magazine, no matter what it was, you wanted to see what it was. You know, but I could just tell that there was something cool going on here. So I acted like I was going to get up from my desk and go sharpen my pencil. And as I'm passing by his desk, he closes the magazine, and on the front cover is a World Eaters Chaos Space Marine. And it was a Warhammer 40,000 Citadel Miniatures catalog. Which, and it's a classic. I forget who did the art, but it's a classic picture. And I was just blown away. And I was like, you know, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I was like, hey, man, you know, what is this? You know, I had never seen anything like that in my life, right up to this point. Like the art was just so evocative, and everything about it, even just the font of Warhammer 40,000 was just like, whoa, this is crazy cool. I got to know about this. And he was very passionate and excited and started flipping through the magazine, showing me all this stuff. He's like, oh man, it's a miniatures war game. And I'm like, miniatures war game? You know, my mind's just racing. He's like, yeah, they're like toy soldiers. They're metal and plastic, and you got to put them together, and you got to build a battlefield, and you play a game with them. And I'm like, oh, you know, I got it instantly. I'm like, oh, this makes sense, you know?
That's awesome.
And so that was the first moment. And that kid is still my best friend to this day. And anyway, so he also introduced me not just to Warhammer. We became best friends from then on. He not just Warhammer. He introduced me to BattleTech, Magic the Gathering, and Dungeons and Dragons. And so I got into all this stuff at like the same time. You know, not just wargaming, but role playing games and card games. The whole gaming hobby I got into it all at the same time. And right off the bat, I'm like already trying to collect this stuff and do this stuff. And, like in my early years, it was really hard to acquire that stuff because being a kid, you don't
Mhm.
have a lot of money to buy miniatures, but I still would try to get what I could for birthdays or Christmas or the odd occasion where my mom would give me $10 to buy a blister pack or whatever off the shelf and try my hand at painting stuff, which was horrible at the beginning because nobody showed me how to paint or
Well, you
even
didn't
prime
have the
miniatures.
YouTube tutorials like you do today. It
Oh
really
no,
was just, yeah, yeah, I know exactly. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, like I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know I had to prime them first. So
Uh-huh.
it took me a long time to figure things out as far as like painting goes. I mean, I'm still figuring shit out. I think, you know, but it probably took me a couple years to really figure out. Oh, I finally saw it like in a White Dwarf, where it was like, oh yeah, you need to prime your miniatures, and then it had that like really basic like 4 tier step or whatever to layering paint and all that.
Hmm.
And so, I got the idea how to paint miniatures and stuff. And from there, I've been in, just to sum it up, because I could go on and on. Sum it up, I've been in the hobby in one form or another for the past almost 30 years now, and I haven't really stopped. It's always been a passion of mine, and yeah, it hasn't stopped, man. I'm still obsessed and still as passionate about it as I was when I was 9 or 10 years old. So
That's awesome, man. That is awesome. And yeah, so and I think that you're definitely of that generation of gamers that you remember when Games Workshop was like when White Dwarves. I always say when White Dwarves were super cool, like before they sort of turned into an advertising thing. White
yeah,
Dwarfs used to just be amazing. Like it was so that's cool that, it's always great to sort of, everything you were saying was like this just yeah, just different points of just connection. That's awesome. Um so did you it sounds like from you played so you got in on I guess it was the 4th edition change, was that the Bretonia
right,
Lizardmen? Yeah.
yeah. So when I first got into Warhammer Fantasy,
Mhm.
fourth edition was still out, I guess, but I never saw it on the shelves. Right,
Okay.
it would be another year before I got my first Warhammer Fantasy box set.
Mhm.
So the next year for my birthday, my mom bought me the fifth edition Warhammer Fantasy box set, and it had just come out. So it came out the previous year, I guess, um, or something like that. It was pretty new at that time. So yeah, that was the first Warhammer Fantasy box set that I received was the fifth edition box set with the Bretonians and the Lizardmen. And back then, me and Andrew, the kid I was just talking about, we played out of that box set for a long time. just those miniatures that we had. Now his older brother was a gamer too, so I think that's where Andrew learned about all this stuff was from his older brother, and his older brother actually had like fully painted metal armies. He had a Beastman army, and he had I think he had a Bretonian army too, and all that stuff. So he was nice enough to not only show me some more about painting, but he also gave me some miniatures to add to the Bretonians. And I think I traded the Lizardmen to him for his Beastmen at one point. So that, but in the early days, I was really like, we were just kids playing. We were trying to play by the rules, and we were playing on the floor, doing some classic floor hammer, or we just lay out like a sheet on the table and have some books under it. But we were playing. We were trying to play, but it was early days,
It
and
was
we
a
didn't
magical
quite know.
time. Yeah, you don't
It
get the
really
rules
was.
right. You
Yeah.
play on the floor, you play with books. And
Hmm.
it wasn't the commercialized. And don't get me wrong. I love where the hobby is. We've come out of the dark ages. We've got YouTube channels. But I feel also like I miss that time in the hobby whenever you didn't sort of need all this extra stuff to play a game. It's just you're on the floor, you're getting books, you're getting Coke cans, you're messing up the rules, but you're just having a blast, And there was like I said, it's a beautiful thing back then.
And to be real, I think that's what I've come to realize nowadays, and that's kind of what I want to capture today. Like, I kind of came to a realization about 10 years ago. I was like, I want to go back to. I wasn't having fun in gaming, and I wanted to go back to having fun. I was like, what was fun about this? And I started thinking about my youth and what I had fun doing and what inspired me and what drove my imagination crazy. And it was all that old stuff that I liked when I was a kid. So I just went back to the stuff I liked when I was a kid. Now, we weren't playing on the floor anymore because I'm too old to do that. But we were playing with that spirit, or trying to play with that spirit we had when we were kids, and just having a good time.
Yeah.
Except now we're drinking beer and, cursing and making lewd comments or whatever, but we're, and having probably some more intelligent conversations. But still we're that's kind of the spirit I try to capture today in wargaming, is the same spark I had when I was a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it's funny, we let's sort of get back to, because you're sort of, I think that you are, really talking about Warhammer Renaissance, and I read through it, and I think it's interesting that, like, we're at this interesting place to sort of like pick up on our previous conversation, how we've got Warhammer Fantasy, this rank and flank, and I also want to sort of make sure we are targeting this conversation to sort of Warhammer Fantasy specific. Like, I know there is stuff like Conquest out there. There's other rank and flank games, but they're not part of, quote, I think, what we imagine to be the Warhammer universe, right? Like, I've played Kings of War in the past. I play Age of Fantasy Regiments, but I'm not really playing with their lore. I'm playing in the old. I'm not even calling it the old world. I'm playing in the Warhammer Fantasy world. To me, that as I've always claimed to be, I'm an end times denier. Like, the end times never happened.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I just ignored all that shit.
Just ignored it and just having our fun. So I feel like we've got, and it's interesting that Games Workshop, they released Cathay, I think, at the best possible moment, because I think if they didn't release it, I think that Old World was starting to really go pretty hard, almost sort of downward. I've been sort of watching the rank and flank space, and there is just, I was watching, I won't name call any, but I was watching one particular interview, and I was watching them to sort of discuss Warhammer Old World a year afterwards. And I felt they took about 20 to 30 minutes to provide all these, like, it was all dancing around the issue, which I think what I picked up, which I think a lot of people felt up, is that they're unsatisfied with Old World. They just, and I have to just, I'm going to try to say in 2 seconds what I think that they've tried to diplomatically say in about 30, 40 minutes, which is that Old World's not that good. It's, I think that, like, it's just, and I have to say, it's not, I've played it a couple of times, and I would say this, like, I liked the game. I enjoyed the games I played, but the reason I enjoyed the games I played is because me and my opponent were sort of like, yeah, we're just going to sort of play this version of the rules, but just, we're not going to do all the stuff. We're not going to sort of play rules as written. We're going to, like, basically play how we think it should happen. Like, we're not going to have lines. We're not going to do all sort of the nonsense that goes on. We're not going to bring two dragons. We're just going to sort of, like, and I think that's interesting, right? That you can enjoy Old World, but you sort of, and I think that other people, like this Renegade pack, they're almost sort of codifying this. They're sort of creating their own custom changes to Old World. But at that point, I have to ask, and this is why I go back to Warhammer Renaissance or Ninth Age, if you have to change a game so much, and if you're changing a game like Old World, why not just pick another game and change that one, right? You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
If you're willing to make your own community tweaks to Old World, why not just pick another game that you feel is just better and then play that game, right? So that's what I mean. It feels like we're in such an interesting space. So I'll kind of let you go ahead.
Yeah, it's a weird thing for sure. I mean, I think we already talked about this, but that whole community thing started because there was no space to fill, really.
Yeah.
So, the community filled its own space from people were enthusiasts and kept the game alive. Now you brought up an interesting point, and I don't want to dive too far into this right now, is, it really, at the end of the day, I can play just about any game, and if it's with the right people, we're going to have a good time,
Yeah.
right? And at the end of the day, rules really don't matter that much to me. It's the feeling we're getting playing the game, and the person across the table that's most important to me. It's what I love about wargaming today is, I love looking at my old miniatures, and I love looking at my opponent's beautiful miniatures, and I love just hanging out and having a beer, and we're having a good time and talking about whatever, some old movie we saw, or whatever, and just having a good time. So it doesn't really matter, but rules do matter to a little bit to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's a reason why I like these old games and stuff. Now you were mentioning, why not just make your own game, and that's fair. But for me, I've played a lot of fantasy games, but I've yet to find one I like as much as Warhammer Fantasy.
Mm.
And I don't really know. I couldn't really tell you why. Because, there are things that are clunky about, like, especially old Warhammer Fantasy. There's some clunky things in there.
Mm.
But at the same time, I kind of like the clunkiness. It's kind of fun. It's wacky. It's random. It's just fun. And I think that's what I like. Not only the rules, but I think I also like the world. I like the old flavor, and the old lore and all that stuff, and the lore that was baked into the rules, right?
Yeah.
All this kind of stuff that, yeah, I mean, I guess you could make another game, but
Well, I would say not necessarily make a game, but like play. I would say this: if you're willing to tweak the old world,
yeah.
and effectively, why not sort of tweak or go to another game that you just like better, right? Like, in other words, I think,
yeah, no.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah,
Warhammer Renaissance, right? I guess I'm more saying that, like, I think the people who, if you're unsatisfied with old world, and some people like it, and that's fine, but
mhm.
why not look at Warhammer Renaissance and make your tweaks on that one? Which I think Warhammer Renaissance, I've read some of the rules and I watch your videos. And by the way, go on GMCody's channel, watch his videos. Very good coverage of. I think that one thing I think you do is that you aren't reading the rules for Warhammer Renaissance. You're sort of basically telling me as of like what has actually changed, right? It's like you're basically
Right.
talking to former Warhammer players. You're like, okay, you know all this stuff already. It's like, here's the things just to keep in mind. So I guess that's sort of what I'm saying, is that, like, if Warhammer the Old World if it was a great game, why a year into it, the community is either looking for alternatives, or there is a huge channel like Mountain Miniatures that's just like, yeah, we're going to do our own community. We're doing these community renegade pack thing. And it's like, you know what I mean? It just feels, I don't know. It's interesting, I guess, to sort of say
Yeah,
that.
it's very interesting. I mean, like, the thing about, I can't speak a whole lot about the old world, only because I haven't played it yet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really interested in playing it, to be honest with you. I gave it a look. I gave it a read over. I watched some people play it, and it just did not appeal to me at all. And I could just kind of tell by looking at it. It was a very it seemed very half baked.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't seem like a fully realized thing. It seemed like a very half baked game to me. It felt kind of like 8th edition 40K when they were doing like all those indexes and all that stuff, like it was a very, like, not really a fully fleshed out game, but they were presenting it as like a fully fleshed out game.
It's definitely unfinished. I mean, like, and I'll just sort of give one particular spot, and I could pick others, but I think then this is something the community. So my guess is they spent the minimum amount of time putting these rules, because, like, in the old rules, the fact that you don't align after a charge is just.
Yeah.
I felt that was just an oversight in the rules, and Games Workshop basically didn't want to admit it, so they're just like, "Oh, yeah, that's how it works." You know what I mean? It's like, why would after a charge you align? And I felt that, like, it was just something that they just said, "Yeah, it's fine." And I feel there's so many parts in these rules where it's sort of just exactly. It feels like a half-done system, and, like, I don't know. So I do agree with that. And so I think that you're right to look at the rules and just was there one in particular set of rule like that just was there one rule set or was there something in general that you looked at and said, "Ah, this is not for me."
Are you saying as far as the old?
Yeah, so I would say when you
Yeah,
looked at the old world, was there
yeah.
something that in your reading or in your watching the discussions that just said, "Yeah, this game isn't for me."
Well, right off the bat, I wasn't attracted to it. Because to be honest with you, I'm not a Games Workshop supporter anymore at all. They
Mm,
lost me a long time ago for a number of reasons that I don't want to go into now. I mean, if you've been around long enough, you know why. Because they did a lot of really shady things through these, especially the past 10 years or so, that
mhm.
just really, really turned me off of Games Workshop. On top of the fact that the games themselves just felt really lazy. Like we're talking about the old world here, but even 40K just feels really lazy to me now.
Yeah.
And I nothing about it appeals to me anymore. I don't like the corporate attitude. I don't like the laxy daisy attitude towards making the games. It doesn't feel like there's any passion behind them anymore. The miniatures are fine, but they're not for me. They're I don't really like them. There's nothing about. So right off the bat, like when I heard about the old world coming out, I was really not that interested to begin with.
Mhm.
I already have my Warhammer fantasy that I like. Why, that was made with passion, made with love, and it's a good system and it's robust, and people are still playing it today. So why would I go to the old world? But at the same time, I always give things a fair shake.
Yeah.
So I did take a look at it, and I can't tell you like right off the bat what specific rules or anything. I just got the general impression that it was very vanilla and very bland. Right? That's kind of it felt really soulless to me.
Mhm.
Didn't feel like it had any of the passion that the previous versions of Warhammer Fantasy had. It didn't have that love and passion that made me excited to want to play it. There was nothing about it that seemed interesting. The rules seemed really boring and vanilla and bland. Um, which yeah. So that's all I can really say. That's just it was more of an impression I got
Mhm.
more than say the rules, right?
Okay.
Um,
I
yeah.
mean,
So
your rule you were and this is something that like I don't like to I don't here's I'm one of those people that like I always feel that a person who's played a lot of Warhammer, you
yeah,
can look at the rules and understand like, let's not treat people like they're children. You haven't played the game. I mean, you've played a lot of Warhammer, and I was the same way. I looked at the
yeah,
rules and I'm like, yeah, I mean, you know what I mean? And it's unsurprising that when I played some games, luckily I played with the right people who were super
right,
cool,
yeah,
who sort of said, let's not play the rules as written, let's play in the spirit of it.
yeah, yeah,
And but I
yeah,
would say even in those games, I still felt a lot of clunkiness as far as how spells work and
uh-huh.
how like templates just start appearing everywhere. And then it's just like no one moves, or if they do move, it's just I don't know. It's just yeah, it I don't know. It's sort of halfway between trying to be a competitive game, but it's not, but also trying to add some flavor. I felt it's you're right. It's just very bland. It's not really getting anything across.
Well, I think that's part of the other problem with the community is it seems like the broader wargaming community now, and I could be completely wrong about this, by the way, but it seems like to me most newer, younger gamers, especially, are very much into the competitive, tournament-minded aspect, right? And that's kind of what they expect out of a game is it's going to provide, at the very least, a very, very well balanced head-to-head level of play. And I think that's probably why a lot of the younger guys are moving away from Warhammer, the old world, because it's probably not really fulfilling that, like they wanted to fulfill that, but it's not. And then the older guys, it's not fulfilling for them because they want the old world. They want that old spirit of Warhammer, and this is not fulfilling for them. So it's in this weird purgatory of Warhammer.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, where does it fit in? I'm not really even sure. Who is this game for? I don't know. It's like they didn't really know. It's almost like they didn't really know who they were making this game for. You
That's
know?
exactly that. That's I think that's the quote that I think that what you've said right there is probably summing up how I think myself and a lot of people, they didn't know who they were making it for. I think that's a really interesting statement right there. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Like I think, and I will give a caveat too, because I come from the one page rule side of things.
Sure.
We
Yeah.
have got, this is what I would say. I think that when we talk about younger guys being involved in competitive play, I think that's a bit self-selecting because I think the Warhammer to get into 40K now, you have to be a person who is willing to spend just ungodly amounts of money.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
yes, you want to be, but it's one thing I've seen with one page rules. It's actually opened up a lot of younger guys that come into play, but they are coming to play for fun because the what's the word, the monetary investment is much less, right? And
Right.
I think
Yeah. Yeah.
that's something that I like with one page rules or with Warhammer Renaissance is that, and 3D printing, we're getting people in that aren't so sort of select. The, what's it called? The survivor bias, right? The people who are sticking in
Sure.
this hobby. So I think that's a good thing. But I do agree with you that 40K now, the people who are getting involved in it are so hardcore because you have to spend so much money, and that's going to be Cathay, right? I mean, I think that Cathay is going to. I think people love Cathay right now, but once they see those prices, I think
Yeah.
that it's going to be a whole nother level of price increases for Old
Yeah.
World.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this is a brand new army, and we have seen Games Workshop target Old World for some of the highest price hikes. You know, so I don't know. Is
I think you're right about that actually. And the more I think about it, I am seeing like a seismic shift amongst the younger gamers that they're coming to this side of they're getting tired of they got I got tired of this a long time ago, and I think they're going through this phase too, where they're getting tired of the competitive head-to-head tournament play and the esports mentality, and they're coming to the side of just wanting to play war games for the joy of playing war games
Mhm.
and the fun of it. I am seeing that actually because I've noticed like the historical club here, um, has it's increased double fold from what it was,
Yeah,
and it's a lot of younger guys. Um, and these are old school historical war games. These aren't like this isn't bolt action. This is like volley and bayonet and stuff like that. This is like old school war game, historical wargaming, and there's younger guys coming into that.
mhm.
Same with the historical convention we have here. It's a lot of younger guys coming in playing these games, and and like you said, one page rules and Trench Crusade, right? Like is a good example. That's not really a tournament game, and it's exploded, all over the place for a
Mhm.
number of reasons. But so I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right that I think there is definitely there's definitely still those like competitive head-to-head tournament players. They're never going away. That's fine. I love that space exists for those people. I get it. I never shame anybody for how they play. Like everybody approaches these games differently. How they do it is perfectly fine to me. Like that's great. Everybody should, find the group and the people and the way they want to play their game for
Yeah.
them. Um, but yeah, I think you're right. I think people are starting to see these other options and spreading out into these other
Exactly,
options.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I mean, I think for me, and like I'm, so I know you've got Warhammer Renaissance, and like I know I'm in the one page rules space right now, but I'm also like I try different games here, and one of the things that like I like about one page rules is, like I said, the armies, everything is generally free, and you have this point system. I've been working on some tweaks for Age of Fantasy. And it's funny because I'm always saying this, like that seems to be happening a lot in the rank and flank space. Everyone is sort of either one playing their own edition, like six. They're like, oh, we're just this, and like, or people are making their own tweaks, and just within their own community, people are saying, hey, let's do our tweaks here. So I've put out my tweaks, and I've had some people actually had some people reach out to me about trying to play this, and it's just, and I would say this though, it's is that really even a bad thing? Like, is where the rank and flank place at where everyone is sort of doing their own thing. Is that actually a bad thing, or is that, or would we love to see us all coalesce behind a different game?
I don't think so. I think this is a great thing, in my opinion. To be honest with you, I think the less corporate wargaming is, the better.
Mm.
I don't think wargaming was meant to exist in a corporate environment. And when it does, we see what happens. It gets stifled, and then you get these shitty games. In just half-baked products, and it's stuff, there's no passion behind it. So I love, it's not just in wargaming, it's happening all over the gaming sphere, in role-playing games especially, where people are just making their own games and doing their own thing and
Yeah,
tweaking their
yeah,
own
exactly.
systems and doing all this stuff. I think it's great. I think it's fantastic. And it really goes back to the roots of wargaming.
Hmm.
I mean, that's what these guys did back at the very beginning. This is what people did even when I was a kid. We did this stuff. When I was a teenager, we had our own house rules and tweaked things and made our own units and all kinds of stuff. So I think it's fantastic. I don't think we all need to coalesce in one place. I really don't. I think everybody has, like I said, everybody has the game and the group for them and should find the people they like. And we can also meet in the middle sometimes,
That's
right? It's
exactly,
good to,
yeah, exactly.
you know,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
the next point. Is one thing I'm learning is, wait, I have my guys on square bases, but I can also put them on some, what do you call, the stands. Wait, I can actually play multiple games with the same army, right? And maybe that's a really great thing where we're at, where we can actually, like, we don't have to be disciples of a game system. Like, and that's something like, I play some old world, and like, if I find the right people to play old world, I enjoy the game. But I also play Age of Fantasy Regiments, and I like that one. But I'm also gonna look to play Warhammer Renaissance or Ninth. It's like, wait, this is actually an opportunity for us to play 3 or 4 different games, and maybe we do combine parts of each of those games and find our own place in the community.
Yo, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like I'm totally about it. I play a lot of different games. I don't just play Warhammer, and I use all these miniatures for all different games, and if one of my good friends was like, "Hey, you want to play Age of Fantasy?" Well, I never played it, but sure, I got the miniatures. Let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it wouldn't, yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that's one of the great things right now about gaming is there's so many options, and you get so much life out of just, it's not like back in the old day where you had your Warhammer army and it's your Warhammer army. There was
Yeah.
not much you could do with it. Now you can do so much with that, right? Like you could play Sword Weirdos, you could play Age of Fantasy, you could play Brutal Quest. There's all kinds of
Mm-hmm.
options. You can make up your own game, right? You can even publish your own game now. So it's a wonderful space we're in, I think. And yeah, I think that all this stuff that's happening right now is good for the hobby. It's where the hobby should be. And
Yeah.
we're going. What I really like about it is we're going back to the roots of wargaming, and like we're going back to what made it cool and fun, and people. And there's more and more people jumping ship in that direction, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's a really positive thing, and I think it's going to be it's going to be bad for some people, right? The big companies, namely, maybe down the road, but
But is that a bad
uh,
thing? Yeah, like, why, like, who cares if the wargaming hobby isn't profitable to a company that sells rules? I mean, can it not just be a whole bunch, like, and I know, like, I've seen some of these people, they have their, what do they call them? Their Patreons, right? And like that's, they write these rules and they get a little money, and like, hey, like, maybe that's actually a better system than a corporate giant that's got a game designer at the table, but with that game designer is a marketing person, a CEO, a production person, a person here who's obviously wants to maximize money. And yeah, he's like presenting this game in this meeting, but he's got the production guys like, oh, we have to sell more of this unit. And we have the marketing guys be like, well, we need to do this. And we got the CEO, well, we need to, it's like, wait, why can't you just have a guy like, and I'm for one particular instance is like the Warhammer Armies Project guy. He's just a
yeah,
single
yeah,
guy. He's got a little Patreon. They send him some money each month, and he works on the books, and it's just him, right? I mean, like, and I,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. I mean, like that. This is I think this is great because it's just gonna these are being made by people that are actually passionate about wargaming. It's not, like you said, a bunch of suits in a corporate office dictating what needs to be made. It's like back in the days, like old school 1980s Games Workshop, where, Brian Ansel was just like, hey, we got all these sci-fi miniatures. We need a game for it, and make a game for it. And Rick Priestley's like, okay. And he writes Warhammer 40,000.
Yeah.
And, it's that kind of thing. And it comes out of pure love and passion for wargaming. And you get more creative things coming out of that too, right? Out of that sphere, when you're not beholden to stockholders and a corporate giant and suits and all that stuff. You're not beholden to all that. You're going to have more creativity and imagination. I mean, look at all the stuff that came out of the 80s and 90s, especially all the crazy, wacky ideas that came out of the gaming sphere during that time. It's because it wasn't completely it was starting to become corporate, but it was still a very small cottage industry.
Yeah.
And it was coming out of, games made by gamers that were passionate about games and had all these crazy, wacky ideas. And we got all this cool stuff. And we're starting to get that again. And
Yeah.
I think that's fantastic. I'm absolutely for it. And like you said, there's more than one way to skin a sheep. Like you can make money and still produce war games. There's plenty of people making all these indie games and making hand over fist of money if you know how to do it. And it's just a small team of people doing these games.
Yeah.
One or two or three people, and that's it, making these games. So it can be done. You just got to catch up with the times. And I think we're in a really good space right now. And I love the direction the whole wargaming sphere and the whole gaming sphere is heading.
Yeah.
In general, I think it's really good.
Now, I wanted to get you on. So it's really great to sort of discuss the broader flank, but I definitely would love for you to sort of polemicize a little bit for Warhammer Renaissance, because I think it is true that you can have fun playing with any guys, but I also believe that if a game is better, you'll have more fun, right? It's like, yes, you can have fun playing a bad game with the right people, but you can have even more fun playing a great game. And when I say great game, it's what you value. So I would love, maybe tell us a little bit about Warhammer Renaissance and what you like about it and why you sort of gravitated, because you're not even the creator of Warhammer Renaissance. I think it's another guy. You just sort of talk about it. And I've loved how and I love to get you, because you're impartial, right? You could really pick anything you wanted, right? If I get the creator, and I could get the creator on here, of course he's going to be like, "Oh, it's the greatest thing ever." So maybe tell us a little bit of what you really like about Warhammer Renaissance.
Yeah, sure. So, the reason I gravitated towards Warhammer Renaissance is what happened is, short story, when I got out of high school, I stopped wargaming. I was still gaming, but I wasn't playing miniature games because I was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I was in bands and all this stuff. And that kind of took over, and miniature gaming kind of took a back seat. Well, after I got into my 20s, I decided, I had a real job and was making good money. I was like, man, I want to get back into miniature gaming. So I got back into playing Warhammer 40,000, Warhammer Fantasy and stuff. And Warhammer Fantasy specifically, it was 8th edition at the time. And there weren't that many people playing it. There was only, when I started playing it again, there was only one other person I was playing with. And then eventually we had like a small group of guys that was between like 4 and 6. But when the implosion happened, when the end times happened, everybody stopped playing except for me and this one guy, So we were like, well, we're not going to stop playing Warhammer Fantasy, but we also came to the realization, because we started playing tournaments and stuff, that, we would come away from these tournaments just having like a headache, and it was not fun. What I noticed is I had more fun at the tournaments when I came in last place than when I was like in the top 10, and I was like, why is that? So I started like reevaluating what I wanted in gaming, and it wasn't like the tournament scene and all that. So we started, talking and all that about going back and playing older editions of these games. And that's what we did. So we started playing 40K 2nd edition, and we started playing Warhammer Fantasy 3rd edition, actually, which is one we didn't play, but I was just like, man, this looks cool. Let's check it out. And, so we started playing all these older games. And around that time, I was, so we started trying out different systems, different fantasy systems. I kind of went on the holy grail quest for the greatest fantasy rank and flank game, right?
Yeah.
And so I just started like, we started playing all kinds of different systems. I can't even name them all. Like it was all kinds of oddball stuff, old, new. We were just looking for a game that really filled whatever. There was some kind of itch to scratch, and I couldn't find where that itch was, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and then I found Warhammer Renaissance, which came out. I forget when it originally came out. I think it came out around 2018 or 2019. And when I saw it, I was like, man, this is a really cool idea. So what Warhammer Renaissance is, for those that don't know, is basically it is a mishmash of basically the greatest hits of Warhammer Fantasy in this guy's eyes. So I think it was written by one guy, Baldur.
Mhm.
Um, and Baldur basically he grew up in the 80s and 90s playing Warhammer. And so he really liked the spirit of third, fourth, and fifth edition Warhammer Fantasy, but he thought that the rules were a little clunky. But he liked all the old school army lists and all the flavor it had and all that stuff. So he made his own community version. So really, what it is a mishmash of like fourth and fifth edition fantasy with the army lists and stuff and all the flavor. And but it has some of the modern tweaks
Yeah.
from sixth edition onwards. So it's a little bit more elegant, especially in the movement phase, but it still has, for example, like the magic system, still the old card magic system.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so it's
And
like,
yeah, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah. So it's just kind of like the greatest hits to me of like Warhammer Fantasy. And so we started playing that, and I just instantly fell in love with it. I loved it. In fact, it's my favorite version of Warhammer Fantasy now.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's exactly because I looked at your videos. That's how I found your videos. Well, from Crown of Command, I found out about Warhammer Renaissance, and then I found your channel doing,
oh yeah,
and from there I read some of the rules, and like, yeah, the army lists are sort of, I feel they're going back, but they're not some of the original crazy that it was. It feels like it's a little more toned down, and then you do have some just nice housekeeping movement rules. And there is also like Step Up, which is I think a really, I like it. Yeah, it feels like it's the additions that we like, but with a little better system and a little more improvements. Like I think Step Up is just such a great. When I played eighth, it's like I can't imagine not playing Step Up anymore. It just sort of fits. It feels right. Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a really good way to compare Warhammer Renaissance. The one thing I would say is I don't, as a dwarf player, I really would love if they would have if maybe this is something the creator will hear. I would love if they update some of the rules to like I love the ninth age dwarves where you get some
yeah.
additional units. You get the golems, you get that is something that like as a dwarf player and like I've built my army based on ninth age, a little bit Kings of War, but also Age of Fantasy, where dwarves are actually getting a little more familiar. But that's sort of a minor thing, it's not a big deal.
Oh, the one thing about Warhammer Renaissance, I will say, it's definitely, Baldur already said he's trying to keep this in the old school vein, and he's not gonna like anything that comes out for the old world. He's not gonna do, anything that comes out for another game system. He's not gonna do. He's trying to keep it pretty grounded to the old school Warhammer ideas. Now there are some army lists in there that may look unfamiliar to some people, but they were like in third edition, like for example, the Norse,
Yep.
or there is an ogre army there, but it's ogre mercenaries. It's not ogre kingdoms, but it's kind of a
Mhm.
combination of those two things. There's stuff in there like I don't know. There's some variations in the army list, but those were old school ideas. They're not new ideas.
Mhm.
And I think that's good though, because it's if you want old school Warhammer fantasy, but you want a little bit more cleaned up rules and a little less fiddly, I think Warhammer Renaissance is the perfect fit for you. If
Yeah.
you're looking for a more modern take on Warhammer, this is probably not the game for you, because this is still old school Warhammer fantasy,
Yeah,
and that's what it's supposed to be.
and I could say that as I don't mind it because I do have enough dwarfs to just play. But
Yeah,
I would say
yeah,
this: it is nice to sort of go back, like you said, to go back to those third and fourth edition days, but not deal with some of the nonsense of third, which I didn't care for. especially fourth and fifth. And like step up is a really nice thing to have, or the charge meta where it's like
Yeah, yeah.
it's all about just the charge and just So, but
Well,
yeah,
I didn't even know like step up was a controversial rule. Me and you were talking about this before the show until I made that video and everybody's like, "Oh, step up sucks" and blah blah blah. And I'm like, "Whoa, okay." I didn't know this was a big controversy amongst everybody. Yeah, I never had a problem with step up. I thought that was probably the best rule that was introduced in 8th edition. Um, I erroneously said it was introduced in 6th edition in the video. I slipped there, but it was actually introduced in 8th, I believe.
yeah.
And I when I read 8th edition, there were a lot of stuff about 8th edition I did not like, but step up I thought was a good rule, and the reason is, for me, I just felt like it's more fun. If you get charged by some big crazy thing and your front ranks wiped out, you don't get to fight back, and you lose the combat, and they run away, and you don't get to do anything. That's not real fun.
It's
You
sort
should at
of.
least have a chance to
Yeah,
do
but
something.
I don't know. Like it's one of those things that like I think there's. I mean, I would say this as a dwarf player, my
Yeah.
experience is definitely painted towards. Although I think eighth definitely had its problems, and I think that like the stubborn mechanics and the ranks were definitely a problem.
Yeah.
But I don't, and that's the great thing about the rank and flank space. But it's also something that like I said, the creator of this game sort of recognized that he put that in, and I think it's a nod to, I don't know, maybe I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that Step Up is more popular than probably it isn't. The fact that he put that in, and I think it's sort of a nod to a lot of the community. It's a nice housekeeping item as well as some of the movement changes that he added in.
Yeah, well, I think it's one
Well,
thing to say because Baldur is like an old school Warhammer player from the '90s, and that's
mhm.
what he likes. And the fact that he included that leads me to believe that a lot of the older guys probably, you're probably right. They probably don't have as much of a tendency to hate that rule. Yeah, I can go either way with it. I still like playing the older versions of Warhammer where it's not there. I just, I know what to expect if it's not there, but I do like it though. I don't have a problem with that rule at all.
And it's funny because, and I could, we're getting, we could have a whole nother conversation
Yeah.
because competitive play is a big part of Warhammer Fantasy. And I think that when you do play harder, and it all depends on who you're playing with, but you can easily play harder lists. Like I said, Chaos Lords with, I think that when this is what I think the reason he did step up is because if you are going to go back old school and go back to frenzy doubling attacks,
Yeah.
you you really don't want to have the Chaos Lord experience of just killing entire armies, like the sort of the meat blender. So I think that he sort of recognized that like if he's going to go to some of these rules, like with frenzy does still double your attacks, he's sort of saying, yeah, but let's give, because that some of that stuff was rough.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah.
I think that he's saying let's sort of give a nod to a few other people. Otherwise, it's just going to be Chaos Lord
Well,
meta of.
yeah, yeah. Well, also, Baldur, he runs tournaments.
Okay, that
I
makes
forget where he's
sense.
from.
That makes
I forget where
sense.
he's from. I think he's from Sweden. I could be completely wrong about that.
Yeah.
He runs a lot of Warhammer Renaissance tournaments with his local club, and so I get the feeling that they like doing head to head competitive play. Now it seems like it's more laid back competitive play, but still they run a lot of tournaments there. So
He sort
he
of
does
picked up on
definitely
that.
designed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think he definitely designed these rules with that in mind, that this is going to be used for that, right? So yeah, and it's a lot overall. It's a lot more ironed out and a lot more balanced, quote unquote. You're never going to have complete balance in a fantasy game, but yeah, like you said, a lot of this really crazy over the top stuff is toned down just a little bit, but it's still there,
Mhm.
so it's still fun, but it's not so crazy that it's not like game breaking, everything. And the other thing is they update it every year. So the rules I think are pretty much done, but the army lists are always being updated at least once a year,
That's
which is
fair.
really cool. So,
Well, I would love to keep you on for hours and hours and hours, but we're pushing an hour. Cody, it was a pleasure to have you on. I'd love to have you back on. Maybe we can sort of continue on some of these conversations, but
Absolutely.
I'd always like to ask, so a few questions. So one, I always like to have a few questions for my guests. One of which, what is your favorite faction lore in sci-fi and fantasy? And it's specific to a war game, so you have to pick war game lore. And what's your
Okay.
favorite faction lore for a sci-fi and fantasy?
Faction lore. Okay, so I'm not a huge lore guy. I like lore, but
Mhm.
lore has always been kind of like I'm not beholden to the lore, right? Like it's kind of this cool thing that gives me ideas for my own thing. But I do like lore. But as far as like my favorite faction in sci-fi, definitely be the Eldar Harlequins.
Oh, okay,
Uh,
nice, nice.
they're my favorite. I love the Eldar too, but like specifically, I really love the Harlequins,
Mhm.
and they've always been my favorite um, faction in 40k. They're just they're still one of those like factions that's still like so weird and so mysterious, and they don't really have a lot of lore, and that's what's cool about them.
Yeah.
Like it's very mysterious and cool, and it's just like yeah, this every time I look at those models and think about them and look at the art, I'm like my imagination goes crazy. And so yeah, they're my favorite faction in sci-fi wargaming. Fantasy wargaming, I guess it's another Warhammer faction would probably be the Night Goblins.
Oh, okay.
They're
Oh, wow.
yeah, they're just
We're gonna have to
yeah, I
fight
love
sometime. Night goblins against dwarfs. Wow.
oh well, let's do it. We can do it, man. We'll do it on TTS or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I apologize.
Yeah, yeah. So the Night Goblins, and I love the orcs and goblins in Warhammer Fantasy, but specifically the Night Goblins. I used to have a Night Goblin army. I don't have one anymore, but I'm rebuilding a orcs and goblin army right now. And funny enough, I'm painting up a huge horde of Night Goblins right here. Uh, so yeah, they're my favorite for obvious reasons. They're funny. They're just crazy. I love the magic mushrooms, and I love the way they look. Everything about them is just really cool and fun and fluffy, and they're just so fun to play. And that character comes out on the tabletop when you're playing old school Warhammer, especially with the Night Goblins. I always just have such a blast playing the Night Goblins.
Very cool. Very cool. So, one other question I'd love to ask our guest is, what would your dream wargaming experience be? So, I always like to say, if you're a billionaire, you have all the money and you have no budget. You also have all the time, right? So, you've just no job, no nothing, and your obligations are taken care of. What would your dream wargaming experience be?
Oh man, well, first off, have you ever seen the Perry Twins gaming room? Uh,
I don't think so, no.
if you've never seen it, look it up. I
I'll have
think
to
there's
look
a
it
good
up.
video about it.
Okay.
But that's what my gaming room would look like. It's just, shelves full of miniatures and terrain, everything we need with modular boards. And like they have backdrops, for pictures, and they have like a night and day lighting and stuff. I would totally do all that and have a huge, basically, just a huge open space, not just for wargaming, but role playing and all that stuff, in one space. And I would do it all the time. But the two things I would probably do is one, I would buy up all the old Games Workshop models from back in the day that I always wanted as a kid,
Mhm.
first off. Second, I'm also a big historical gamer, and I think I would go balls to the walls with some of these historical projects that I don't really ever have the time to do or space to do, and do it all like in grand scale, 28 millimeter, Napoleonic battles
Oh,
and
that's cool.
all,
Yeah.
all that stuff that I've always dreamed about doing and I have done with other people in the past, but to actually have all that stuff at my beck and call at all times. And, and also if I'm a billionaire or whatever, I would just pay everybody to just come over and play with me all the time.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
You know,
completely
be
agree.
like, here's a salary every year. That just means you're on call for gaming
Oh, that's
anytime I
awesome.
need.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, man, Cody, it's been great. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things you've got planned? First of all, if you're hearing this, please go subscribe to GMCody. Give him some support. I think you're getting close to 1,000, so let's all help him get to 1,000 subscribers. But tell us a little bit about the stuff you have for in the future for your channel.
Oh, so my channel is something that I just do as a passion project. It's not like a serious endeavor. It's very low budget and it's very amateurish. And I just kind of turn the camera on and talk about whatever I want. I rarely plan out what I'm doing, but lately I've gotten a lot of attention to the channel, and now I feel like I have to take it a little bit more seriously. So this year, I think, is really going to be the year of wargaming. I haven't done a lot of wargaming on the channel. Most of the channel has been me talking about old role-playing games and stuff, and playing role-playing games. But I think this year I'm going to get a better camera. I don't have a good camera or phone or anything. I think I'm going to get a better camera and show off, some of the stuff I've been painting, and talk about some of these new and old games that I like, and also do some battle reports and stuff like that. So I think this is going to be the year where I kind of like step up the quality a little bit of the channel, and really, I think it's, the channel's kind of like morphing into a wargaming channel more than a role-playing channel. And that's fine with me because, I like both equally, but I think I would really like to do more wargaming on the channel. So that's probably what's coming up.
Love to see it. Love to see it. So it's the GMCody YouTube channel. Is there anything else, any other place that you'd want people to go, and maybe a Discord or anything else you want to sort of shout out for people?
Yeah, so I don't have a Discord. Well, I do, but I don't use it for my YouTube channel. Yeah, I don't really have anything like that. I'm always lurking around in all the obvious places. Me and Josh from the Crown of Command are good friends. You can usually find me on there when he does his splatter datters
Yeah,
on the
yeah, yeah.
weekends. I'm usually half the time I'm there painting with the guys and shooting the shit. And me and Josh have collaborated on some stuff, and we're good friends and all. So you'll definitely find me around on the Crown of Command. And if you haven't subscribed to the Crown of Command, I definitely recommend it if you're into old school Warhammer. It's a great channel and probably my favorite channel on YouTube.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. All right. Well, Cody, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, man. Always love talking gaming, and anytime you want me to come back, I'm more than willing to.
I'll call you on that. Thanks a bunch.